Today's Life Diaries is about different styles of communication. And you as a person might engage in different styles of communication depending on the occasion, right? So we can go and change our styles depending on who we're speaking with and what situation we might be confronted with, right? And it's really good to know the style that each person has, and of course the style that you have for yourself, so you can identify the way that you're communicating and to see that perhaps the other person is not the same communicator like you are. So some styles can actually make it easier to communicate with other people, right? So you can find ways to talk to people without disrespecting them, and that actually can create an effective communication, and it can reduce the conflict, and it can promote much more healthy relationship with others. And by knowing these different styles, it can help you to develop effective and assertive communication skills. So you're going to know the right place in the situation to use an effective style. And being assertive means that you respect yourself and other people, right? And it is the ability to communicate your thoughts and your feelings, and you use open and specific and honest communication. But being assertive, right, it doesn't mean that you're always going to have it your way, but it's actually very constructive in helping you achieve a compromise. Assertive is good for me because I like to find to compromise within people, but I also use more other styles of communication. I can be assertive, but at the same time, I need to be speaking my truth. Even if an outcome is not what you expect, right, you can be satisfied because you handle it well. That's how assertive styles work, right? And it can help reduce the chance there are going to be any hard feelings between you or the other person when you engage in this type of communication. So it's a skill, right, that anybody can do, but you actually need some time and practice before you master it, right? And I could use some better skills in being more assertive sometimes because I can be quite cutthroating in my communication style. But you're going to see throughout my videos that I use different styles of communication. So depending on how I feel with my mood right there. Any type of communication, as I said before, it takes practice, and you can actually master things. You can practice it on your own, or you can even try it out with a friend. And they can give you their honest feedback so you can know where you stand, and how you're communicating, right? When you're communicating, you also need to think about the person that you're talking to and how best to start communicating to the other person and the best way that you can actually cope with the interaction. So the first thing you need to identify is your usual communication style before you can actually start to practice to communicate assertively. So as I said, there are many different communication styles, but the ones that I'm going to talk about now are the most common ones, right? And not all of the communication styles that I'm going to talk here below are recommended, but they can actually help you when you use them in the right situation, right? So the first one is the assertive, I spoke before. And usually the assertive style is one of the most recommended communication styles, and it reflects and it promotes high self-esteem because this is the top of the most healthy style of communication, and it actually allows you to more likely achieve what you are looking to achieve. Because with assertiveness, you have the confidence of communicating without having to employ manipulation or games. So you know your limits and you don't allow yourself to be pushed beyond them just because the other person wants or needs something from you. And surprisingly, this is the least used style from a lot of humans out there. So a person that is using this style can actually achieve their goals without having to hurt others, okay? So they protect their own rights while they're being respectful to other people's rights, and they know how to express themselves socially and emotionally. And assertive communication means that you're making a choice and you're taking responsibility for that, and you're asking directly what needs are to be met, and you're expressing your feelings with I statements, and you're actually also accepting that there is a possibility of disagreement. And being assertive means that you will be involved with having a good eye contact, right? You can have your gestures can be expansive, and the tone of your voice can be medium pitch, and you can get to see the speed that you're talking and the volume that you're talking, right? So people on the receiving end are able to be clear about what is expected or felt because they know where they stand. And this will mean that there's more respect, and it's going to make it much more easier to communicate. And with assertive communication style, you will also feel good about yourself, and you will even leave the other person feeling respected and heard, right? Now, the other style is the aggressive style. So this type of person that uses this style, it usually involves winning at all costs, even if it is at someone else's expense. So people who use this method usually feel like their needs are much more important than that of the other people. So they feel like they have more rights and are the ones who contribute more compared to the other people. And this is not an effective way of communicating, because what you see is that people are going to be more focused on reacting to how it is delivered than the message itself. So a person that would be engaging in aggressive communication will be using frightening, loud, threatening, and hostile voices, right? And that relies on intimidating and not respecting or even bullying other people in order to achieve their goals, right? Because they are always out to win. And usually if you get to see them, their posture can actually seem bigger than other people, and they can even use fast and big and sharp gestures when talking to the other person, right? So every method that they employ to communicate is there in order to intimidate the other person and make them do what they want. And many people try their best to avoid confrontation, and this is why there are people who will do what they don't want in order to end the confrontation. So the person on the receiving end will become, they're not going to cooperate with us, they're going to be defensive, they're going to be hurt, they might get afraid, they might be humiliated, and they are going to lose respect for that aggressive person. And there are people who will tend to fight back and become even more aggressive. I'm sure all of you have been there and seen what that's like, okay? And this is never a good place to be in, because it can sometimes result in a physical and verbal violence, and nobody needs that, right? And people will find it hard to report any mistaken problems to an aggressive person because they fear that a blow up can come. So ultimately, conflict and unhealthy relationships result because of this. Now, we have another style which is considered and named the passive-aggressive style. And this style involves being passive on the surface, but actually acting out anger indirectly or behind the scenes, right? And in order to deal with an overwhelming lack of power, the prisoners of wars will resort to employing this communication style. And people who opt for this style are those who feel like they have no power, and usually they are resentful, right? So they usually express their feelings through the subtle undermining of the object, whether that is real or whether that is imagined, of their resentment, and even if it means sabotaging themselves, okay? So the perfect way to describe this method would be an expression of that they're cutting off your nose to spite your face. So people who use this style are often indirectly aggressive, devious, sulky. They can be complainers, they're devious, and they're patronizing. Okay, they gossip and they're two-faced. They're gonna be pretending to be pleasant to people to their faces, but they can become poisonous behind their backs by using rumors, sabotage, gossip, and all of those different things. And I'm sure many of you came across these types of people. And I don't know about you, but I do not like these types of people. Right? So they're the types of people that try their best to present a perfect picture, but they're doing the opposite on the back, okay? Because they are able to fool people because they use a sweet and sugary voice and they're telling people what they want to hear, right? And this will make it harder for the other party to notice what's going on. They can appear to be warm and friendly, right? And you can easily fall into this trap without knowing. And keep in mind that the people on the receiving end end up feeling hurt, angry, confused, and oftentimes resentful, right? And this will make it harder for them to trust the person in the future and may be unwilling to work with them, right? So in this style, right, it will sometimes get you the results you wanted, but it will have a lasting effect for a long time. Even when you get to be sincere, the people are not going to believe you because they will think you're trying to take advantage of them. And again, also resentment and anger builds as you're not directly asking for what you need. Then let's go to the other style, which is the submissive style. So people who use this style are usually the ones that are, I would say, people pleasers. They're the ones that look to please other people in order to avoid any conflict. And this is terrible. This is really, really terrible. So people with this type of communication will usually put their needs of others before theirs because they see other people's needs as being more important than theirs, right? So they will not contribute much because they don't see it as being good enough as that of the other person, of the other people, because they think the other people have more rights than them. And this method can actually leave you feeling inferior, and you will have a hard time with your colleagues and friends and family, etc., etc. So being a doormat is never the best option, and it's actually quite harmful to your self-esteem. So if you're using a submissive communication style, right, you can be feeling quite apologetic, and you might be trying your best to avoid confrontation. And this can only yield to other people's preferences and are not able to express their actual feelings and desires. So this withholds you from a lot of things. So usually these types of people that have the submissive style, they usually act as if they're the victim, right? So they usually will find it hard to take responsibility or even to make decisions. And the other person on the receiving end will end up feeling guilty, frustrated, and exasperated, right? So they will see this as an opportunity to take advantage of you, and again, resentment can build, distancing you from others. And let's go to the other style, the manipulative style. And this is terrible. So this style is scheming, calculated, and shrewd. So people who use this style are so skilled at controlling or influencing others for their own advantage. So they have spoken words that hide underlying messages, and the other person doesn't know what it is. So manipulating can seem like an effective method to get your way, but that will come at an expense to you. So people who do this don't have regard for other people and are focused on what they're going to get in the end. And unfortunately, these types of people don't ask directly for their needs to be met. And what they do is they guilt other people. And they can even employ artificial tears to make it look even more real. Isn't that terrible? They use the hand dog expression, making it much harder to say no to them. And their voice can appear envious, patronizing, high-pitched, and ingratiating. And people on the receiving end, right, can actually feel guilt and be ready to help them in any way that they can. They can start to develop feelings of frustrations and resentfulness, and can end up getting annoyed, angry, or even irritated. And it's very hard to know where manipulative people stand because it makes it harder to work with them. And then let's go to another style we're talking about the direct style, right? And this, I engage a lot in this. And this is a style where the speaker doesn't mask the message he wants to pass across. So this usually involves using a clear language that can be easily understood by the other person. There are times when the receiving party doesn't want to hear something, but using a direct style will mean providing them with information, but might be received in a more harsh way. So it is much easier to know where a person stands when they use direct communication. Right? And I love direct because you can actually place boundaries on direct communication. So the culture of the person can sometimes determine the right style to use in the situation. So the person on the receiving end will be able to know what you're saying without having to beat around the bush. And it's also a great style to use when there is limited time. Now, and the last style of communication I want to talk about is the indirect style. So of course, this is the opposite of the direct communication. And people that use this type of style, they tend to mask their intentions and needs. And you have to be a bit careful when you're using this style of approach. It is very hard to know what they are looking to achieve, and it can be hard for a person to decipher what they're trying to communicate, especially if they are not accustomed to a particular group or culture. And this can sometimes employ the use of facial expressions or even subtle signs. So if, say, you don't approve a certain habit by a friend, you may emit loud, exasperated sighs or even glare at the person whenever they do it. And the person on the receiving end may not necessarily understand what is wrong and might end up thinking that you don't like them for no particular reason. And this can create a lot of problems, especially if you are supposed to work on something together. Now, another thing I want to let you know here is how you're communicating your message, what type of communication that you're actually using. Again, I want to tell you that how the type of communication that you use to talk to people, it can actually have an effect on your message. So you also need to know that there's different people out there and they have a preferred method of communication. So sometimes, no matter what your style is, you can adjust your style to fit different types of people depending on the style of the person you're communicating with. So what style of person am I talking about? I'm talking about, there's 4 different styles, right? There's the analytical, the intuitive, the functional, and the personal. So let's start with the analytical. So an analytical person is a person that enjoys to hear facts, data, and hard numbers. They disregard anything that has emotional statements in them because that for them is quite vague and unimportant. So I guess you understand what type of a person this is. So if you're communicating with a person like that, you need to have your research in place, right? You need to give them the facts and the data and then follow up with them, right? The upside of this style of communicator, I love them at a certain point because they're actually good at looking at issues logically. There are not going to be any problems with emotions getting in the way. But if that analytical person is not performing well, right, you could bring them the facts and the data that can show them where they're lacking, and they will accept that they need to improve on those areas. So that's how you get through an analytical mind. The disadvantage of this is that these people can be perceived as cold or emotionless if you don't know the way they're communicating, right? So they can make people feel uncomfortable, or they might even dismiss those who do not communicate in the same way. And that is unacceptable, right? Because they're not appreciating the other styles of communication. And this can usually cause issues within all these different people because they might sit down and they might be analyzing and they're calculating and they're checking their details. And this can lead them to have slower response times to issues, to tackle over issues. And that can result for them in very lost opportunities. And then we have some other types of people who are intuitive. And I've got some of that also in mind. And an intuitive communicator is a person who is all about the bigger picture. And usually they can even possess having an open mind to look at things, and to listen to information, gather information. They might not be having the facts, but they see the bigger picture. So this person doesn't like to be bogged down into like nitty-gritties of a discussion, and they prefer to get a general overview. So they're so quick to see the broad picture, and they can easily go to the conclusion, and sometimes they can offer great insights as to how to best to complete, to find a solution to complete a project or anything like that. So the upside is that this type of communicator understands ideas quickly and is already proposing solutions to possible challenges, right? And they don't need to have their handheld, they're already off and they're running, right? They're already after something. And they can often come up with out-of-the-box ideas and enjoy challenging themselves and others. And I love this style. This is so, so good. So the downside of this is that impatience can often lead to mistakes. So intuitive communicators, they hate having to sit down through boring stuff, right? But usually if they skip that, they can actually risk missing crucial information. So they also will chafe at communicators who need to explain ideas or perhaps projects step by step, like functional communicators. So next is the functional communicator type of person. So the functional communicator lives on the other side of the spectrum from the intuitive communicator. They usually prefer to walk through the steps of the process, and they outline each one until they reach the conclusion and can tie it all up in one neat package. They're usually detail oriented. They're good at understanding which processes will be the most helpful to ensure success, and they can be trusted to create functional timelines and to allocate the tasks and to run the projects. So when you're speaking with a person like that, you need to make sure that you're prepared, right? Because these people are gonna want to know the full details of what you're trying to present to them, and you don't want to get caught up with metrics or feelings or big picture thinking. Okay, you must instead come up with something that is ready to be discussed, right? So imagine you say something like, we want to create and fix our employee manual, right? So we would like you to write the outline, and consult, with the other team, and you hire an editor and you edit the product, and it's that will be much better rather than you saying, don't you think the user manual could use some improvement? Can you take care of that? So do you see where I'm coming from? So the upside of a functional communicator is their detail-oriented mind, right? Will be sure not to miss any important steps. So they find it easy to focus on implementing projects and have a native understanding of what it will take to accomplish. And their thorough nature will make sure that their project runs successfully, right? And the disadvantage of this is that their doggy type of focus on this type of process, improving each step and stage, can actually sometimes lead them to lose sight of the big picture and not accomplishing the actual goals of the project, for example, right? And their plodding step-by-step style can also bore the audience, especially if a functional communicator is paired with an intuitive communicator. So these two styles are a bit like oil and water, and neither appreciates the other's communication very much. However, if it's done well, a functional communicator can take on the project, for example, while the intuitive communicator can deal with the bigger picture. So you see how teamwork comes to play. And lastly, let me talk about the personal communicator. So this type of communicator is the complete opposite to the analytical communicator and on this spectrum of the communication styles. So usually they prefer to use emotional language and they value the human connection. And I engage in this a lot because these types of people are seeking to know how the other people are feeling as well as what are they thinking, right? So this type of communicator tends to be at times diplomatic. They help to solve conflicts, and they're seeking peaceful solutions to inter and intra issues. So they deal with the inside of us and the inside of others and the outside from what we see. So for this type of communicator, you want to lean into the emotional component. Something like, how do you think, the customers are feeling right now? Do you think that they're tired? Are you feeling that they're burnt out? Their numbers, have dropped. Would you mind looking at this closer? I feel that they might need support. They use a lot of emotions, we need to find and fix the problem, and things like that. So this is the personal communicator. So the good thing about this style is that a personal communicator will effortlessly build deep bonds within their team or their people. Okay, so they will be focused on building cohesion and often will step into a problem-solving role when others are having difficulty in their communication. Now, the disadvantage of this style is that it might become too emotional for other communicators. So, and especially it gets quite difficult when you're face to face with an analytical communicator, because they're not going to appreciate that approach, right? And they might even disregard what you might say, which can lead to hurt feelings or resentment, right? So if you don't know these styles and why people behave the way they behave, you can risk feeling hurt and angry and all of those things. So you need to know, like, all of these communication styles exist on a spectrum, right? And people will rarely be 100% of one style. Rather, they can have a primary and a secondary and even sometimes a tertiary, the style, it depends. So a person might be primarily analytical, but secondarily they can be functional, and you can see that people can actually switch between the styles as necessary based on the situation, the person that they're speaking with, and of course other factors come to play, right? In general, you will find that if you manage to have a mix of all of these communication styles, it can actually result in a better team. So each style, as I said before, has its own advantages and disadvantages, and having a mix of everything can make you ensure that you don't have massive blind spots, right? So it's very important to keep in mind all of these communications, because it can help you communicate with people, And for me, I love the assertive communication style, and it's good, but at the same time, I have a love and a hate for it. So an assertive communication style, as I said before, is considered the most effective communication style. So a person that uses this style, right, they try to talk and pass their message, and they don't want to belittle other people, right? They're not going to resort in manipulation or pushing the other person's limit. Rather, they're seeking to compromise through active listening, and they clearly express their wants and their needs. So usually these are people who have high levels of self-esteem, and they don't go into aggressive communication. Usually, for me, an assertive communication style will be best used in a business setting, which I understand, because at that point, you need to be calm, you need to be measured, you need to be positive. You can handle a lot of situations when you're assertive when there, and you can actually solve problems. But when it comes to other let's say settings, right, I don't like assertive communication. I despise it because I feel many times that I want to portray my message with the true being that I am. So with my being, I have compassion for people, I have empathy for people, but at the same time, I do not like to be assertive on many aspects of my life, due to the fact that I've noticed that when you are sometimes assertive, it's kind of like you can reach a point where you can, inside of you, right, you might be trying to find a resolution with the other person, but if there's something that is bothering you, for example, and if you haven't learned how to become assertive, you can actually be suppressing your feelings. You can be suppressing your feelings and not being expressive to your needs, and that creates a lot of problems within you, right? It's a different thing if you're equipped. If you're already born and have assertive skills, that can also show lacks in your life. And it's a different thing if you're trying to develop assertive communication. And me, myself, I am trying to become more assertive, because I am more of a direct style of communicator. So what you see is what you get. How I feel, I'm going to express it, right? And by all means, not trying to degrade another person. Depending on the environment that you grew up in is the way that you're going to be communicating. So in this world, all of us needs to accept the way the other person is communicating, right? And if we don't like something about the person, right, we have to change the way we communicate to them in order to feel safe and accepting of our own style. We should not be going about our way to change people. Me personally, I love the way I am. I can curse a lot, I can be direct, I can be indirect, I can use different styles. But the most important for me is to be my authentic self, so to communicate in my authenticity. And if a person does not like that, right, I understand. I'm not going to be cursing in the business setting or, something like that. Of course not. But you need to understand that in my private life, for example, right, I'm always speaking my truth. I'm always communicating. What you see is what you get, right? And a lot of people don't like that. And I don't mind if people don't like that, because I love the way I talk, because there's not a lot of people that are direct. It's a very difficult thing to be direct in what you're saying, right? And for me because I'm learning to become more assertive in my communication, for me it's quite difficult, because I feel when I'm being assertive, right, is kind of like I'm trying to pretend to something that I'm not. And I don't like that. I get uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable because I'm not being true to myself. And I don't like to sugarcoat things. This is the way I am. And I also found throughout my years that being a person that you show too much compassion to the other person and understanding and all of these things, I actually found that it didn't really produce a lot of results. I've seen in my life that the more cutthroat that I talk to people and the more direct that I am, yes, they might get offended at that point. They might not like it. But I can tell you, after, some time, these people can actually start understanding much more easier, right? And they can actually become even better versions of themselves. But then again, it depends on the type of person that they are. I am not here to convince people. I'm just here to be able to allow people to open up their minds and try to have balance within themselves. So by having balance, we mean that we here on our channel, I want to make people be able to accept any type of person that is out there. We shouldn't be going around changing people. We need to accept people for who they are. And that comes with their communication style. Now, if one person feels that it will be a good thing for them to change the way they communicate, by all means, they should be doing that. But if somebody loves the way they talk, I don't see no reason why people should change the way they talk. I personally love it when people are cutthroat with me, because that's how I learn best. There are other people that want more sensitive communication, to be, for the other person to show sensitivity. So say, for example, of course, I'm not a psychotherapist or a mental therapist, and of course they wouldn't come to me, but you can imagine if I was a psychologist and people were coming to me and I was cutthroat with them, I don't think that would have a good outcome, right? So every person out there has their own communication style, and certain communication styles are needed. And yeah, they definitely wouldn't be coming to me because by the time, with a psychotherapist, it might take them months to get the essence of the message. And with me, what you will get is that you will get to the essence of the message in a faster way, because I get right to the edge of, what it is that one might be doing, and I cut corners. I cut corners without having all the right communication style, let's say. All right, but this is my way, guys. So yeah, I hope this helped, and be encouraged to look more into communication, because if if you meet a person and you see the way they communicate, you can actually adapt to them, right? And be able to even stop engaging in fights and all of these types of things. So it can actually make your life much more better.